I worked as a pharmacy technician at a 24-hour CVS in Phoenix back in 2016. The pay was decent, and the overnight differential made it worth the weird hours. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., and for the most part, it was quiet after midnight. Just me, the pharmacist on duty, and whoever wandered in needing medicine at ungodly hours. That Thursday started normal. I clocked in at 10, and once things died down around 11:30, the pharmacist that night, Linda, kept to herself in the back while I handled the counter and drive-through. Around 1 a.m., a guy came through the drive-through. White sedan, mid-20s, baseball cap pulled low. He handed me a prescription for Adderall. I took it back to Linda, but she immediately flagged it.
"This is fake,"
she said.
"The DEA number doesn't match, and this doctor's been retired for 2 years.
I told him we couldn't fill it. He just nodded and drove off. Linda told me to note his license plate, and we moved on. About an hour later, the same guy walked into the store. I was restocking shelves near the pharmacy counter when I saw him browsing the aisles, not really looking at anything, just observing. He spent maybe 5 minutes just walking around before coming up to the counter.
"You guys have a bathroom?" "Employees only,"
I said.
"There's a gas station 2 blocks down."
He stared at me for a second without saying anything, then walked toward the front. I watched the security monitor as he left through the main entrance. I mentioned it to Linda, and she said to keep an eye out, but we figured he'd gotten the message. At 2:45 a.m., I heard the front door chime. Same guy, 3rd time. He walked straight to the pharmacy counter.
"I need to pick up a prescription. Last name's Johnson."
I pulled up the name. We had several Johnsons, so I asked for his first name.
"David."
I checked. No David Johnson. I told him we didn't have anything ready under that name. He got irritated.
"Check again?"
I double-checked. Nothing. I said he could call his doctor in the morning. That's when his demeanor changed. He leaned forward.
"Look, I know you've got what I need back there. Just give me a bottle of Oxy or Norco. I'll pay cash."
My heart started pounding. I stepped back.
"Sir, you need to leave. Come on, just a bottle. I'm calling the police."
He stared at me for a few seconds before walking out. I immediately told Linda what happened. She called our district manager, who said to lock the doors and call police. Linda made the call while I went to lock up. As I approached the front entrance, I saw him outside by the glass doors, just watching me. I locked them as fast as I could, and when I turned around, he started pulling on the handle. Hard. The doors rattled loudly, and for a second, I thought he was going to break through. Linda appeared next to me, phone still in her hand.
"Police are 5 minutes out. Stay away from the doors."
We both backed up to the pharmacy area, keeping our eyes on the front. The guy walked away from the doors and disappeared from view. I thought maybe he'd given up, but then Linda pointed at the security monitor.
"He's going around back."
The pharmacy had a back entrance we used for deliveries. It was locked, but it didn't have reinforced glass like the front. We heard him before we saw him on the camera, pounding on the back door, trying the handle.
"Open this door,"
he yelled.
"I know you're in there."
Linda grabbed my arm and pulled me into the small office behind the pharmacy counter. We could still hear him banging, and at one point it sounded like he was kicking it. My hands were shaking. The banging stopped suddenly. For a minute, there was silence. Then we heard glass breaking from the front of the store.
"He broke a window,"
Linda whispered. On the security monitor, I watched him climb through the broken window into the store. He walked straight toward the pharmacy, and that's when I saw the crowbar in his hand. He started prying at the security gate, separating the pharmacy from the rest of the store. The police arrived maybe 2 minutes later, but it felt like an eternity. I watched on the monitor as 2 officers rushed in through the broken window, guns drawn. The guy dropped the crowbar and put his hands up immediately. They cuffed him and walked him out, and one of the officers came back to check on us. The guy had been hitting pharmacies all over the Phoenix area for the past month, trying to get controlled substances any way he could. He had a history of drug addiction and multiple priors for theft and burglary. The officer said we did everything right by locking the doors and calling immediately. After they left, Linda and I just sat there for a while, neither of us really saying much. The store had to close for the rest of the night so they could secure the broken window and process everything as a crime scene. I went home around 5 a.m., way earlier than my shift was supposed to end. I kept working overnights for another 6 months, but I was always on edge. Every time someone came in, acting even slightly off, I'd tense up. I eventually switched to day shifts just to avoid that anxiety. Looking back, I'm just glad Linda was there with me. If I'd been alone, I don't know what I would have done. And I'm glad that guy didn't get any further than he did. Who knows what he would have been capable of if he'd made it behind that pharmacy counter. I'm a guy who's worked as a night janitor for about 3 years now, and honestly, it's been one of the easiest jobs I've ever had. I work at a mid-sized office building in downtown Seattle, one of those corporate places with 6 floors of cubicles and conference rooms. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and for the most part, I'm completely alone. The routine is simple. I start on the top floor and work my way down, vacuuming carpets, emptying trash, wiping down desks, cleaning bathrooms. The building closes at 7 p.m., so by the time I get there, everyone's been gone for hours. I've got my own key to the back entrance, and I lock it behind me when I come in. That Tuesday started like any other shift. I clocked in at 10, grabbed my cart from the supply closet, and took the elevator to the 6th floor. I had my earbuds in, listening to a podcast. I started with the bathrooms, then moved to the cubicles. I'd been working maybe an hour when I heard what sounded like a door closing somewhere on the floor. I pulled out one earbud and listened, but after a few seconds of silence, I figured it was just the building settling. Old buildings make weird noises, especially when they're empty. I kept working. I finished the 6th floor around midnight and moved down to the 5th. This floor had individual offices along the walls and cubicles in the middle. I started with the offices, emptying trash and wiping down desks. I was about halfway through when I noticed one of the office doors was closed. That was weird because the day crew always leaves doors open so I can get in easily. I tried the handle, but it was locked from the inside. I stood there confused. A door locked from the inside meant someone was in there. But the building was supposed to be empty. I knocked.
Hello? Anyone in there?
No response. I waited, then shrugged it off. Maybe someone locked it by accident. I made a mental note to mention it to my supervisor and moved on. I finished the offices and started on the cubicles with my vacuum. I was maybe 10 minutes into it when I heard footsteps. Not the building settling. Actual footsteps walking somewhere behind me. I turned off the vacuum and pulled out my earbuds. The footsteps stopped. My heart started pounding. I stood in complete silence, listening. After 30 seconds, I heard them again, moving away from me, towards the stairwell. Something in my gut told me this wasn't right. If someone was working late, they would have said something when I started vacuuming. I quietly pushed my cart towards the elevator, trying not to make noise. I was maybe 20 feet away when I heard a door open, followed by footsteps coming towards me. I didn't wait. I left the cart and ran to the elevator, slamming the button. The doors opened immediately, and I jumped inside, hitting the lobby button. As the doors closed, I saw a figure step out from the cubicles. A man, maybe in his 40s, wearing all dark clothes. He wasn't running, just walking towards me with this calm, deliberate pace. Our eyes met for a second before the doors closed. I was shaking as the elevator descended. When I got to the lobby, I ran for the back entrance and locked it from the outside with my key, then called 911. My hands were trembling. I told the dispatcher everything, that someone was in the building who wasn't supposed to be there, that I'd locked them inside. She told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. I walked around to the front to see if I could spot the guy. The lobby had floor-to-ceiling windows. I saw him maybe 2 minutes later walking through the lobby towards the front doors. He tried to push them open, but they were locked. He pulled on the handles harder and harder. When he realized he couldn't get out, he turned and disappeared back inside. The police showed up about 5 minutes later, 3 squad cars. I met them at the front and gave them my key. 4 officers went inside, while 2 stayed with me. I watched through the windows as they searched. It took maybe 10 minutes before they brought the guy out in handcuffs. 1 officer came over for my statement. Apparently the guy had a backpack full of expensive electronics, laptops, and tablets. He'd broken in earlier in the evening, probably right before closing, and had been hiding in that locked office, waiting for everyone to leave so he could rob the place. The officer said if I hadn't noticed the locked door and the footsteps, the guy probably would have gotten away with thousands of dollars. But here's what really freaked me out. When they searched him, they found a knife in his jacket. The officer didn't say much about it, but the implication was clear. If I'd confronted him instead of running, things could have gone very differently. After the police left, I went back inside to finish my shift, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that moment when the elevator doors were closing and I saw him walking towards me. He didn't look angry or panicked. He just looked calm, like he knew exactly what he was doing. And that knife. I don't know if he would have used it, but I'm glad I didn't stick around to find out. I still work the night shift at that building, but I'm a lot more careful now. I check every office before I start cleaning a floor, and I never wear earbuds anymore. I need to hear if something's off, and every time I lock that back door when I come in, I think about how close I came to something really bad that night. It's scary to think I was just a few feet away from someone who could have hurt me, and I had no idea until it was almost too late. I'm a girl who worked the overnight shift at a 7-Eleven just outside of Portland for about 2 years while I was in community college. The hours were perfect for my schedule since I had afternoon classes, and the overnight pay was a few dollars more per hour. Most nights, my manager would schedule 2 people, me and this guy named Tyler, but sometimes one of us would cover alone if the other called out. It wasn't ideal, but the store was in a decent neighborhood, so I never really felt unsafe. That Friday, Tyler texted saying he had the flu. My manager tried calling around for coverage, but nobody was available, so I worked alone. I clocked in at 11 p.m. and started restocking shelves, cleaning the coffee station, and checking inventory. The first few hours were slow. Around 2 a.m., a guy came in. He was probably in his early 30s, wearing a grey hoodie and jeans. He walked around the aisles for a few minutes, not picking anything up, just browsing. Eventually, he came to the counter with chips and a soda. I rang him up and he paid with cash. The whole transaction was normal, but something felt off. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with this blank expression. When I handed him his change, he took it without breaking eye contact and walked out. I watched him on the security monitor as he got into a dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot. But instead of leaving, he just sat there. I could see the glow of his phone screen, so I figured maybe he was texting someone. I went back to restocking and didn't think much of it. About 20 minutes later, the door chime went off. The same guy walked back in. This time he didn't browse. He walked straight to the counter and just stood there, staring at me.
Can I help you with something?
I asked, trying to sound polite, even though I was getting uncomfortable. He didn't say anything at first. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke.
You work here by yourself?
My stomach dropped. The way he asked felt deliberate, like he was confirming something. I didn't want to tell him the truth.
My co-worker's in the back.
I lied, gesturing towards the storage room. He nodded slowly, then turned and walked out without buying anything. I watched the monitor as he got back into his car. This time he didn't park at the far end. He pulled up right in front of the store, positioning his car so he had a clear view of the entrance and counter. I was starting to panic. I texted Tyler and called my manager, leaving a voicemail. I didn't know what else to do, so I kept working, but I watched the monitor constantly. For the next 30 minutes, he didn't move. He just sat in his car, facing the store. I tried to keep busy, but my hands were shaking. Then, around 3 a.m., he got out of his car. I watched on the monitor as he walked to the front door, but instead of coming inside, he just stood there, looking through the glass. I froze. After a few seconds, he knocked. Not aggressively, just a couple of light taps. I didn't respond. I stood behind the counter, staring at the monitor, hoping he would leave. But he knocked again, harder.
Hey, I need to ask you something.
He called out. I still didn't move. Something told me not to engage. He knocked a third time, even harder, and then tried the door handle. The store was technically 24/7, so the doors weren't locked, but I'd been thinking about locking them. I rushed over and flipped the lock just as he started pushing the door open. It caught and he pulled back, surprised.
Why'd you lock the door?
He asked, his voice louder now.
We're closed for cleaning.
I lied, my heart pounding.
The sign says you're open 24 hours.
Emergency cleaning. You need to leave.
He stood there, staring at me through the glass, and then started pulling on the door handle again. Harder and harder. The door rattled and I backed away, pulling out my phone and dialing 911. As soon as I started talking to the dispatcher, he stopped and walked back to his car. But he didn't leave. He just sat there, engine running. I told the dispatcher everything, that a man had been sitting outside for over an hour, tried to force the door open, and that I was alone and scared. She told me officers were on their way and to stay on the line. The police arrived maybe 5 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulling into the lot. The guy saw them and tried to drive off, but they blocked him in. I watched as they pulled him out and talked to him before putting him in the back of one of the cruisers. One officer came inside for my statement. He told me the guy had a warrant for stalking and harassment in another county. Apparently, he'd been doing this to other women working alone at night, watching them and trying to intimidate them. The officer said I did the right thing by locking the door and calling immediately. After the police left, I tried to finish my shift, but I couldn't stop shaking. Every time the door chime went off, I jumped. When my replacement showed up at 7 a.m., I left without counting the register. I quit a week later. My manager tried to convince me to stay, but I couldn't. Every time I thought about going back, I'd remember that guy pulling on the handle, trying to get in. I don't know what he would have done if I hadn't locked that door, but I'm glad I didn't find out. It's scary to think I was just seconds away from something really bad happening, and there would have been nobody there to help me.